Hello, BookTube. It's Ros from Scallydandling About the Books.
Hello, I'm Berna from Berna's Bookish Adventures.
And we're here today to talk about our a shared reading of a classic Turkish novel, which I'm going to call Memed My Hawk. But Berna, you'll call us...
We call it Ince Memed by Yaşar Kemal.
Yeah. And this was a special experience for me to read a book where I was reading the English translation and my kind of buddy reader was reading it in the original. I've done that a few times, and it really adds to the experience for me, she says selfishly. But I think we both enjoyed this book and enjoyed the experience of reading it together. So and how did we come to agree to do this, Berna?
I think I know that I wanted to read this for a long time, and my father was always, recommending Yaşar Kemal books to me. And he once said, I distinctly remember that night, he once said in a dining table that, Berna, you say you're reading so many books, but if you haven't read Yaşar Kemal, then you haven't read, that was his tone. You haven't read enough, you can't say enough about Turkish literature. And I was so ashamed, actually. And I thought I should read Yaşar Kemal, and I should start with his best-known work, and his actually debut first novel. So I bought the set of this book. There are 4 books in that set. And then when I was tagged to do the bucket list tag that is created by Sean the Book Maniac, I can't say the other part without reading it out loud.
Oh, mooks and gripes.
Yes,
list.
Yeah, it's really hard for me to say it. And I wanted to put this book in that list, along with some other Nazım Hikmet books which I haven't read. But this was the one that I wanted to read the most. And you said in the comments that you have heard good things about this book and you wanted to read it. And would it be okay to read with each other? And I was actually going to read this book in January with 2 of my best friends, but one of my friends is moving her house and she couldn't read it. So I read this book with Rose, and I immensely enjoyed it, reading with you, and reading it. And I was really wondering how it would go with the translation, because the writing style is so beautiful. And it was great to know that the translation was good, as you said.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's really interesting for me about reading a book in translation with like a native speaker reading the original is that chance to get a sense of whether the translation is capturing something of the original, and so I think sometimes I read you a little bit of the English translation, so you could compare. And because we should say more about the book and explain why it's an important
of course
Turkish book. But I think one of the things that you said about it is that in Turkish it has a very distinctive style and a beautiful style, which is one of the reasons why it's a classic. Yeah.
Yes.
And so that's always a challenge for a translator to convey a very distinctive style in another language that works very differently. So maybe we'll come back to that. Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Should I explain, if I explain something about the book for people who haven't read it?
Of course.
So, it's although I will say that Berna's done a video about it in her Turkish Shelf series.
Yes.
Where she talks about it's a brilliant series of videos. I love it. She talks
Thank
about
you.
Books that are either I mean, they're either books by Turkish authors, or some of them are books that are set in
Yes.
Turkey. So it's like, hence the Turkish Shelf, which is great. And so there's a Turkish Shelf video about this that summarizes some things, but just to introduce it here. So this is it's kind of a coming of age story. It's the hero, Memed, and how would you pronounce it just right for me, Berna? His name? Memed. It's more Memed. Yeah. And so Memed, he starts the book as a boy, and by the end of the book, he's still a young man, I guess, in his, like, maybe it's
mid-20s.
Just into his 20s. Yeah. So it's his youth, and it's set in a relatively remote, rural part of Turkey in the southeast. Yeah, in the south. Yeah. And in probably like the late 1920s, early 1930s, but the book was published in 1955.
55.
Yeah.
And the author actually started writing the book in 1940s, but I think he needed time to process the story and how to finish it. That's what he said in his interviews, and he finished it in 1955.
Yeah. And the story is how he goes from being kind of like almost like a poor, like a peasant, I guess, to becoming something of a folk hero, like a brigand or a bandit, or almost a Robin Hood figure in English terms, you know, that sort of outlaw who's stealing from the rich and, you know, kind of giving to the poor. Yeah. So that's the so it's the story of how he ended up in that life and his adventures, I suppose. So that's kind of the shape of it, isn't it?
Yeah? Yes. And it is also deals with how the people in his village deal with Mehmet's progress, and how he is viewed by them in different periods of his growth. It's interesting. I found it very interesting in that sense as well. But it's mainly the Mehmet story.
Yeah, his story, but having said it's his story, it tells you a lot about what it was like to live there at that time, how people were, I suppose, exploited by the bigger landowners, and the difficulties that made for them, and the sort of the lawlessness that did happen in the maps, and people being kind of pushed onto the fringes of society. And one thing that I think you knew about the book and the author, which I wouldn't have known. I knew it was seen as like a Turkish classic, which was why I wanted to read it, because I've only read contemporary Turkish authors, nothing older, but that he was quite a political writer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was very, very political, especially in the time when I was a teenager, and he was actually not seen very sympathetic in the government and in the political arena. And because I didn't have a political identity at that time, I thought he was like, you know, trying to separate the Turkish society. That was my view. But as I read more and more about him, I knew that this was just a propaganda by the government and the people who do not, who are very, very pro-Turkish people. I do not want to say racist, because that would be too much, but too much Turkish identity. I think Turkish identity covers all all of the people from different races. I mean, I come from a Greek island, although my race is Turks. They can separate. I mean, they can say that I'm not Turkish because I wasn't. My grandparents were born in Turkey. So,
yes.
I mean, it's all a perspective thing. But because of that, and because my reaction to his political identity, I thought this book would be very, very political.
Yes.
And I have read some books by his contemporaries, of course in Turkish, because they are not mostly translated. And even though they tell a story, their political agenda is felt through the book so much against republic, pro-republic, communist. Nazım Hikmet is a great poet, but he's very political, actually, his works. And that sort of made me shy away from Yaşar Kemal. And although I heard that his writing style was very good and it was lyrical, and I wasn't surprised in that area, but I was very surprised how much he just told the story. That was the thing. Not trying to teach us with political agenda.
Yeah, no, that was the I thought the real strength of the book for me, because I think you and I are the same in that we're interested in books that have you know, politics and ideas as a backdrop, but I don't like a book that is kind of pushing me to think in a particular way. You know, if I feel like the author is telling me you should think like this, I react against
yes.
that.
Even though I agree with
yes.
the idea, I feel very repulsed by telling. I mean, you should think like that. I mean, I'm old enough to think for myself. So
yeah, and it just spoils the you know, they should write an essay, not a novel.
Yes.
Whereas
this
really works as a novel, doesn't it? And he really, what I liked was he just presents the situation, and he sets up, I guess, Mehmet to be quite a moral figure, a hero figure, but he's not perfect. Yes. And most of there's one or two figures in the story, Abdi, say, who are definitely villains, you know, are set up to be the ultimate, the baddies.
Big baddie.
Big baddie, yeah. But between those two extremes, everyone else is very nuanced in their character, you know, like no one's all bad or all good. Yeah, and that's, so it's very, it's more subtle.
Yes, and it's also relatable because, I mean, in the oppressive power, we can sometimes act like we do not feel like acting. I mean, I could understand some of the hypocrisies going there, telling something but thinking something else. So not in that degree, but it was relatable to read about those people too. So, and I think Mehmet was also quite relatable compared to other folk heroes in Turkish literature. This author says that he was very much influenced by one of the greatest verbal poets in Turkey, Köroğlu. And even though his poets are very heroic, and his poems, I mean, the characters in his poems are very heroic, but they are a bit idolized. But Mehmet is, although he's very decent, has a kind heart, compassionate, he's not idolized, I think, and his lifestyle is certainly not idolized. I mean, they were just crawling under the bushes to get away from the law. So
yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I thought the same, that although there are other characters I make an idol of him at times, and because they want a hero to give them hope. How he's portrayed himself is you know, is that he has doubts and he worries about things and he makes mistakes, and the physical reality of the environment, or the reality of being an outlaw and having to stay in a cave up the mountains, you know, all of that is very real. He's a really fine descriptive writer, Kemal, isn't he? I got so much out of some of the descriptions of like the flowers and the plants and the landscape, or in the town, you know, when he went to town, and young Mehmet goes to town for the first time, and he's really excited by what the houses look like and what the shops look like, and the piles of oranges on a stall, or, you know, and it all immediately, it was, I was there, I was transported.
Yes, and the fact that he writes about the environments that he knows, because he was raised in Adana, although he was not very poor, as far as I know. It comes from his own experience, but his descriptive style is incredibly good. I actually do not like nature descriptions reading, because especially, for example, Orhan Pamuk writes very long sentences, and it's really hard to follow sometimes in Turkish, especially because, you know, you don't know, we can just write a sentence that can be one paragraph long with ends and adding I don't know how to say it in English, adding some clauses, and you know, and it sometimes really makes it really hard for me to read, especially. But Yaşar Kemal uses one-word sentences, sometimes two, for example, 20 words, sometimes 5 words, and he mixes them. And when you read it out loud, it is melodic in Turkish. You read out loud in English, and it really sounds melodic in English too. So it's really a good, I don't know, ability to. I don't know how he did that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the translator did a really good job.
Yeah,
because it wasn't the same as in like in English that has different sort of structures to sentences. I mean, we can do very long sentences and very short sentences, but not in quite the same way, I think. So he captured the lyric quality without kind of copying, I suppose, the style.
Yes.
I was really interested in something you said when we were talking about the book, which is that you don't particularly like poetry. I mean, that's not one of your enthusiasms. Whereas I do, I love poetry, but that actually it's quite, in places this was quite a poetic style of writing, but that didn't put you off.
Yes, it didn't. I don't know. Maybe it was just for complete sentences were always in the structure. Maybe that could be the reason, because I struggle with poetry because of incomplete sentences sometimes, you know, passing from I don't know, maybe I'm too logical minded for this thing. I don't know. I don't mean to say you're
oh, well, I'm very illogical and romantic, obviously.
Maybe it comes from, you know, having a scientific background. It could be any of those things. I don't know, but poetry, if it's not read to me, I do not understand it, actually. So that's but I really did like his writing, because it was between a text, structured text, and poetry, just something in between.
Yeah. So the chunks when he really just tells the story in quite a vivid way with lots of plot, and then there's little kind of more descriptive, kind of more poetic chunks. You said something about structure, and I was very impressed with the structure of the book, the way he put it together, because he does this thing where he he jumps to a different scene and perhaps a different set of people, and it seems completely unconnected to
Yes.
what you were reading. You were really in some exciting bit of the story, and then suddenly you're with a couple of people that you've never met, you know, and you're thinking, how is it? And then every time he makes the connections beautifully and leads you into another bit of the story through that cut, that shift.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it was interesting because he assumed that we knew the backstory, and he told it in small details, and at the end we actually had an idea about that character's backstory, which was, I think, very impressive too.
Yeah. So I absolutely, having read this is a book that I would enthusiastically recommend to any readers out there in the English translation. I think you'd say the same. Yeah?
Yes, I would. I actually talked about that book, and people's reactions were like, "Oh, it's." One of them was, "Isn't it hard to read?" Because of the lyrical style, people were saying it's really hard to read, and some people were a bit hesitant about the political side, like myself was. But I'm trying to say that it's not like that. It's not the Yaşar Kemal that we know from the politics. He's somebody else. I mean, although I now agree with this point of view, but I can understand people's hesitations because of the politics. Yeah.
But this is him just being a really skilled novelist, and
yes.
realizing that this was his first book. Yes.
Yes, first novel.
First novel. I'm just so impressed by that. As a first novel, it's exceptional. Yeah.
And I think in 2013, it was chosen as the best Turkish novel in a list of 100 novels. I don't know the second one, but I know this was chosen as the best. And it is the best that I have read so far. I can say that.
Right. That's quite something to say. I think I might agree. I'm a big fan of Orhan Pamuk, as you know. I really love his novels, but I think you're probably right. This is, you know, it's not fair to compare different novelists sometimes, is it? But I thought this was this really was for me the best Turkish novel that I've read. I can see why you describe it as that. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually did a lot of research for that video, so I couldn't put it everything there. But I know Orhan Pamuk really did admire Yaşar Kemal, and he said that he read his books when he was a child, and heavily influenced by his writing style. Although he has a different sentence structure. His influence, yes, his influence is seen in his books. I can see that. Yeah. And many of the writers that I admire right now, contemporary authors, say that it is the best book. I mean, there are so few books that were set as the first choice, but it was. I think people were. The authors were given 3 choices. And Ince Memed was among those choices in every author, for every author. Yeah. So that's why this book was chosen as the best.
Yeah. Well, I'm not surprised, and I'm really looking forward to reading the second book in the series, which is also available in English, fortunately.
Yes.
So we're going to read that together, aren't we? And we'll report back to BookTube about whether it's good.
Yes. It is said that this book is the bestseller of Yaşar Kemal. Of course, I can understand, but the second book is actually the third bestseller of him. So I think it is quite popular in my country. So we will see.
Well, I think we've probably given a good explanation, and we've
Yes.
enthused about the book. So shall we stop and say goodbye?
Yeah, of course.
Bye, booktube.
Bye.